Hello, and thank you for joining me here at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura, and today I am talking about Bridget Jones, The Edge of Reason, written by Helen Fielding, released in 1999, and I'm comparing it with the movie directed by B.B. Kidron, which was released in 2004. And there is a new Bridget Jones movie coming out in February, and so prior to the release of that film, I'm going back and doing videos for the previous books and movies. And so I have already done a video for the first book and movie, and today we are talking about the second. And I will be covering the third movie as well, but the third movie is based on the fourth book, and the fourth movie, which is the new one, that is based on the third book. So they swapped them for some weird reason. So I will be covering both of those, but those two videos will be out in February because I'm going to wait to do it till closer to the release of the new movie. But the first Bridget Jones movie was heavily inspired by Pride and Prejudice, and here the second book was heavily inspired by Persuasion, which is another Jane Austen novel, and I have never read or watched Persuasion, so I did not catch this reference, but I read on Wikipedia that there's a lot of similarities here between Persuasion. And I'm just going to get right into the details of the plot, which means there will be spoilers going forward. So the first book and movie left off with Bridget beginning her relationship with Mark Darcy, and so that is where the sequels pick up. However, their relationship doesn't last very long because Bridget becomes very jealous and paranoid about Mark's friendship with a beautiful woman named Rebecca. And in the book, they break up because Bridget jumps to conclusions basically and ends things with him, whereas in the movie, she feels the evidence he is having an affair is growing, and so she straight up asks him if he is sleeping with Rebecca. And Mark replies that he won't dignify such a ridiculous question with a response, which to Bridget seems to imply guilt, and so she ends it with him. And in the book, Bridget could be so frustrating the way she just wasn't direct with Mark. Same with Mark too, like both of them. Their communication skills were so bad. Like, you're both in your 30s. Mark might have even been 40, I'm not sure. Like, no wonder she's single because she's a horrible communicator. But anyway, yeah, like if she didn't like him voluntarily spending so much time with Rebecca, she should have told him, right? Being like, I'm not comfortable with this. And if Mark is just like, well, you're being too controlling by wanting me to not be with her, then I guess you just need to reevaluate the relationship, right? Like, Bridget is his girlfriend, so she should be the priority. But they were newly dating, so maybe it would have seemed weird if she said she didn't want him around Rebecca, but still, she could have just been more direct with how it was making her feel, I guess. And then also in the book, there's like a misunderstanding with Mark, perhaps thinking she is cheating on him, because there's this whole thing with like the builder at her apartment who answers her phone, and then this card she gets from the dry cleaner, which like showed a woman's underwear in the card, and it didn't say who it was from. And so Mark is also maybe suspicious of Bridget, and it was all just because they weren't communicating clearly, and that's the reason they ended things, which was annoying. And in the movie, Bridget, she does ask him directly, like, are you having an affair with her, right? So at least she's more direct in that way. But also Bridget, they made her a bit more over the top, like when she is spying on Mark and Rebecca, and she's like on their roof, and then she shows up with leaves in her hair. And then also when they go to the ski resort, and this happens in the book too, where she's a bad skier. But in the movie, she is skiing out of control, and she skis right through a tournament that is happening. And it was just a bit too silly for my taste. But with Rebecca, so in the book, she was a woman that Bridget knew before Mark. Mark did not know her at all. She knew Bridget for years beforehand, but they never hung out. However, once Bridget is dating Mark, suddenly Rebecca is inviting them to everything, and she's being super chummy with Mark, and she is clearly trying to steal him away from Bridget. And in the book, this works, and Mark and Bridget break up, and then he starts dating Rebecca, but he didn't play an active role really in the breakup or him getting in a relationship with Rebecca. They were both things that just kind of happened. Like, he just found himself in this situation where Rebecca assumed they were dating. And so it was kind of odd how that happened. But ultimately, they end up breaking up, and he gets back with Bridget by the end of the story, and Rebecca starts dating one of Mark's coworkers, Giles. However, in the very end, Rebecca isn't happy with Giles, and so she is still trying to win Mark over, but at this point she's unsuccessful because now he is happily back with Bridget. Whereas in the movie, Rebecca is someone Mark knows from work, and we see much less of her here than we had in the book because she is around at the start, but then in the whole middle section, the story takes a turn and Rebecca is totally out of the picture for like an hour before at the very end, she pops up again. And in this end scene, Bridget, Rebecca opens the door and Bridget is like, oh, I forgot about you. And I thought this was funny because I feel like the movie acknowledges the fact that the audience has also forgotten about Rebecca because, again, the story takes a complete turn in a different direction. And so I did think that was funny. But in the movie, they switch things up. And here we find out that Rebecca was not trying to get with Mark. And instead, Rebecca had a crush on Bridget. And that explains the different things she was saying and doing. But after they share a kiss, Bridget tells her that, thanks, I'm very flattered, but I want to be with Mark. And I did think this was a fun change from the book. And then to talk about Daniel. So in the book, Daniel shows up briefly a couple different times. So he calls up Bridget when she has broken up with Mark and he wants to go out to dinner with her. And so she says yes. But then the night of their dinner date, she has to go outside because her friend's phone is in the trash. And so she has to go get it for him. And all she has on is her underwear. So she puts a sweater on over it, goes outside, and then Mark shows up and he sees her, but then he leaves, and then Daniel shows up. He also sees her in just her underwear and a sweater, and so they go upstairs for her to get changed for their dinner date. But then Daniel, because she is only in underwear and a jacket, he sees that as an open invitation to have sex with her, and so he's trying to, make a move, and she's telling him no, and then he kind of breaks down crying, being like, nothing's going right in my life, my career is going horribly, and yada, yada, yada. And Bridget feels bad for him, but ultimately she sends him away. And then he does show up again near the end, which we will get into, but in the movie, he is around much more, which makes sense because Hugh Grant as Daniel is a big draw, right? And I personally loved Hugh Grant as Daniel. I mean, Daniel, he's like a scoundrel, right? And yet at the same time, I really enjoy Hugh Grant. So I was happy they gave him more to do here in the film. And in the movie, his career is going great. He has moved on from publishing and is now also working in TV. And he has a new travel show, which is a hit. And partway through the movie, after she has broken up with Mark, her boss at the TV network asks her to join Daniel on his next work trip to Thailand. And by the way, real quick, in the book, her boss is a jerk, right? And so near the end, she quits her job. However, at the very end, the network reaches out to her and they're like, hey, we know you quit because of so-and-so, but we fired him and we want to have you back. And they offer her a promotion and more money, but none of this was in the movie. And in the book, she also goes to Thailand. She goes with one of her friends and they just go for a vacation just to have fun. Whereas, in the movie, one of her friends still does join her, but it is a work trip and Daniel is there as well. And in the movie, she and Daniel almost sleep together before she stops him because she realizes that if they sleep together, that will be it for her and Mark, right? And so while she is hesitating, a Thai woman that Daniel ordered shows up and Bridget storms off angrily. And in both book and movie, the friend that joined her on this trip, she befriends a guy on the airplane. And it's funny because in the movie, both of them are reading the book The Beach by Alex Garland. I have my copy right here. But that's a fantastic book. And it's about a guy who travels to Thailand. And I do have a book versus movie for that. I want to reread that. And if I did, I would refilm that episode because my current book versus movie, it's back when I just did a podcast. So it's only the audio. So I would love to reread the book and watch the movie again and just do a new and improved book versus movie video. So if that would interest you, comment down below and let me know. But anyway, long story short, the guy her friend befriends, so they're all traveling to Thailand. So once they arrive in Thailand, the friend is spending a lot of time with this guy. And in both book and movie, this guy sneaks drugs into Bridget's luggage. And so she is arrested at the airport and then put in a Thai prison. And so she is there for quite a while. But in both book and movie, Mark helps get her out. And in the movie, Daniel had seen Bridget get arrested at the airport and yet he did nothing. He just went on and got on his plane and didn't care. And so when Mark finds this out, he confronts Daniel and that leads them to get into a fight similar to the first movie. But during this fight, Daniel tells Mark that he and Bridget didn't sleep together while they were in Thailand. And he's like, yeah, Bridget, she got all cold on me. Like, you've changed her. And then he says, like, if you're so obsessed with Bridget Jones, why don't you marry her? Because then at least she would sleep with me. Because this is a burn because Daniel slept with Mark's former wife, right? And so he's joking that if Bridget becomes your wife, then she'll sleep with me because I slept with your previous wife. Anyway, I thought this was a funny scene. And in the book, Mark and Daniel they don't really get in a fight. Mark just punches Daniel and then Daniel leaves. But Daniel, he shows up near the end when Mark and Bridget have gotten back together in the book. And he shows up and he's drunk and he's angry because Bridget put him down as a suspect for a death threat she had received, which I will get into in a minute. But yeah, so he shows up drunk and then Mark punches him and then Daniel leaves. And so they do almost get in a fight in the book, but it was much more mild than what we saw in the movie. But yeah, in both book and movie, basically Bridget and Mark realize they still love each other and they get back together in both. But to talk about the death threat, so Bridget had a builder that was working on her flat, and one day she receives a bullet in the mail, and Mark sees this and he has it turned into the police, and then the police are asking, like, is there anyone who could want to harm you? And so she's trying to think, like, who could be upset? And so she tells them about Daniel, and that night she turned him away, and she's like, maybe he's still angry about that, so maybe it's from him. And so that is why the police question Daniel, which then causes Daniel to be upset, and he shows up at the end of the book. But we find out, though, that the bullet was sent to her by her builder, and he had just been going through a rough time lately. He was disqualified from a fishing competition for cheating, and so he just sends her this bullet. However, by the end of the book, it's all resolved and everything's fine by the end. And then Bridget's parents played a key role in what was happening in the first book and movie, and here we do see them as well. In the movie, they are renewing their wedding vows, and so that's what's going on with them. They were definitely in this movie far less than they had been in the first movie, but in the book, her mom is going to Kenya with a friend, and when she comes back, she has brought a Kenyan guy with her who stays with her and her husband for a while. And then also near the end, the dad, he has to go to rehab because he's been drinking too much, and then by the end, her parents are off on a vacation together. But honestly, I did not care what was happening with them in the book. It just felt unnecessary. Like, this book had so much going on, and so the stuff with her parents was just one thing too many, and I feel like it could have been cut or just lessened considerably. And yeah, like I said, in the movie, her parents are renewing their wedding vows, and so that is like the wedding that happens at the end. However, in the book, it is her friend Jude that gets married, and so we get a wedding scene near the end of the book. However, Jude, the bride, I don't know if it's in her wedding vows or she's giving a speech at one point at her wedding, and yet her speech is all about her single friends, Bridget and Shaza. And so if I were her husband, I would be like, this is our wedding day. Like, why are you making this all about your single friends? Like, this is supposed to be about us. It just felt kind of silly that the bride is going on about her single friends during her wedding speech, right? Yeah. But something that's interesting about the Bridget Jones book and movies right here, these first two, is that the movie, they kind of intersperse things. Like, the first movie took things from the second book. Second movie is taking things from the first book. Like, for example, in the second book, there's this whole thing about her wearing giant underwear and she doesn't want Mark to see it. And we get that in the first movie, right? Because at that book launch, she's wearing the giant underwear and she doesn't want Daniel to see it. And they do kind of incorporate this in the second movie as well, but they made a bigger deal of it in the first movie, and I think they stole it from the second book, because when they made the first movie, they didn't know if there would be a sequel, right? And so they probably felt like they could go ahead and pull things from the second book. And then also Bridget being outside in her underwear with just a sweater, that of course is the end scene of the first movie, and yet that was something that happened in the second book. And then also Mark and Daniel getting in a fight, because in the second book, Mark punches Daniel, whereas in the first movie, Mark and Daniel get in a fight, but then again, they do repeat it for the second movie as well. And then also, the first book, Bridget has a pregnancy scare of sorts. She just misreads the pregnancy test. But in the second movie, Bridget has a pregnancy scare, and I did think this was funny because as she and Mark are waiting to see the results, at first they start out all dreamy, being like, oh, like, do you want a boy or a girl? And, being all whatever. However, this turns into a fight because they cannot agree on how to raise a son. And so I did think this was a funny scene. And yeah, it seems like there were other overlapping things, but those are all I can think of for now. Although I will say one thing from the second book that is in neither book or movie is that she finds out Jeffrey, who is her uncle, some relative. We find out in the second book that he is bisexual because she sees him with this younger guy out in London. And then by the end of the book, he has told his wife about this. However, that does not happen in the movie, but maybe that is what inspired them to make Rebecca gay for the movie. But when it comes to book versus movie, so this book I just thought was all right, whereas the movie's nothing too amazing either. but I was entertained by it, and I do just love the main three cast members. Which, by the way, in the second book, there is another segment where Bridget Jones interviews Colin Firth, and Colin Firth, of course, plays Mark Darcy in the movies. But in the book, she is interviewing him, and she cannot stop just asking him about his love life and the scene from Pride and Prejudice when he has the wet shirt on when he's in the lake. And the scene in the book, like, it was kind of funny. But what I really appreciated about it was the fact that in the book, Bridget comes across as so ridiculous, right? Because she's so fixated on his love life and this sexy scene he was in. And I like it because women actors, when they are interviewed by men, they get questions like this all the time. And it's just so normal, right? And so I love that we see the table turns here, right? And it shows just how ridiculous interviewers are when they ask questions like that. And so again, here it's played as satire and comedy because the actor is a man and men don't have to deal with this as much. But yeah, female actors have to deal with this all the time when they're interviewed by men in particular. But anyway, like I said, the book overall was just okay. And so I did like the movie just a bit better. Again, the first book and movie are far better than these two, but between Edge of Reason book and movie, I will say that the movie wins. And also, yeah, like I know miscommunication is a popular thing to have happen in romance books, but in the book in particular, it was just so frustrating. Like, again, you're grown adults, you're well into your 30s, stop acting like high schoolers who don't know how to communicate properly. So it was just more annoying than entertaining in the book. So yeah. And then again, it was just way too much going on. Like Bridget Jones had so much happening between Thailand, her job, the drama with Mark and Rebecca, and then stuff going on with her parents, and then the builder, and then getting a death threat. And it was just way too much. Oh, and then the marriage of her friend, which was another big thing. But anyway, yeah, so the movie wins here. Thank you for watching this video. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and let me know if you will be watching the new movie when it comes out in a couple months. I'm like mildly excited for it. I have low expectations, so maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised, but we will see. So yeah, anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.